Chapter 1062. So I wanted to wait a little bit because there seemed to be some discrepancies in the scanlation, but those discrepancies seem to have persisted in the official, so I'm just not sure. But it's best to be sure and wait than to just sort of go wild hog and talk about things that may or may not be true. Okay, so the start of the chapter shows Chocolate Town being encased in ice. This is the cover story, by the way. The cover story depicts this. So here's the two minds I have about the situation. One, either Kuzan has touched down on Chocolate Town to start claiming parts of Whole Cake Island for Blackbeard, or this is a Caesar-related incident and he sort of set off a Shinokuni bomb, maybe a smaller scale Shinokuni bomb, and that was made to be a distraction so other Big Mom operatives would go to the scene and sort of give him a chance to escape. That's what I think. So moving into the chapter proper, Lilith the evil, we find out, is being interrogated by Shaka when she captured the ship. Shaka lets her know. Shaka, whom is Shaka the Good, who is the Vegapunk 1, whereas Lilith is Vegapunk 2. Shaka lets her know that this is a Yonko crew and that she should be wary because of Robin and Zoro. So, here's the interesting part that I saw about Lilith, and here's sort of like where the official and the scanlation differ. The little headset on her head makes a Den Den Mushi Puro Puro sound in the scanlation, but in the translation, the official translation, it just makes a ring ring sound. So I'm not sure whether her headset is a Den Den Mushi or not, but that's a very interesting thing to point out. I'm sure we'll see what the deal with these headsets are later on, because all the Vegapunk bodies so far have them. Vegapunk's robot is a very impressive piece of technology that gets Frankie and Usopp very starry-eyed, and we also see Vegapunk's mechanical sea beats, which are pretty cool. Then, moving forward, we are introduced to Bonnie revealing that her father is actually Kuma, and her business with Vegapunk is because of Kuma's current state as a sort of unthinking, unfeeling cyborg. This is very interesting because during Marineford, when they cut back to Shabani Archipelago and everybody watching the war happen on the big Jumbotrons, right? The big Jumbotron projections, Bonnie is crying on the account of an individual. At the time, we didn't know who that was. Back in the day, people thought she had some sort of relation to Ace, which is very interesting because we find out later that she met Sabo, which is sort of stacking her up in importance in terms of the story, if you ask me. Because knowing Kuma and knowing Luffy's brother are like two big check marks, but we'll see what happens with her. But yeah, she says she knows Sabo, but back in the day, everyone thought she was crying over Ace. But no, we find out that she was actually crying over Kuma, which is interesting in hindsight because now it makes me wonder what is her relationship to Dragon and Revolutionaries, seeing as how she too now has met Sabo. And now what is her relation, if any, to Koala, because Koala was also sort of like a surrogate daughter, I presume, to Kuma at some point. So we'll have to wait and see. I guess Bonnie's actual name is Bartholomew Bonnie, and Juri is her mother's maiden name. Maybe that was done to separate herself from Kuma. Though now I'm wondering, why was she pushed into becoming a pirate? We'll have to find out about that later. But we see Vegapunk's lab proper, right, as the Straw Hats are climbing up sort of like the baseline of the island to the main floor where the, I guess the entrance of the lab is. Funny little thing that happens on the way up. Luffy calls Bonnie Bogey again and she corrects him. And then she actually is received the respect of Luffy calling her by her actual name, which doesn't happen too often. Usually he just gets a nickname in his head and sticks with it. I don't think he called Law once. It was always Traffy, and Kid was always Jaggy. So this is an interesting development. So they get up to the lab, we see this cool version of a robot fighting a dragon. and this space monster, this dragon-like entity, has stars on its back, which is very interesting that we're keeping up with this sort of star theme. Okay, so when Luffy Gum Gum rockets into the space monster, he goes right through as he tries to eat him because the space monster is a hologram. This then leads to the small crew of Luffy, Chomper, and Bonnie being tricked by a Sunday, whom of which they thought was real, and they get very upset when they find out it's not. Interesting thing that happened when this chapter was being leaked for spoilers and the scanlation trend came out. People thought that this little scene of Luffy having some Gear 5th qualities was some sort of form or transformation. No, I think in a narrative context, this is the exact opposite. It's sort of taking the steam out of the significance of Gear 5th, or more so putting more into context of this of Gear 5th being kind of like a gag power. So it's making it less serious for using it as a gag here. At least that's what I think. I don't think it's anything like big or extravagant as like a new Gear 5th transformation or like a pseudo transformation like a half step or anything like that. I think it's just a visual gag. A very funny visual gag, but a visual gag nonetheless. Now, moving forward, we see Atlas, and Atlas is a very interesting one because she is number 6. It says she's number 6 on her dress, but this is sort of misprinted later on in the explanation because Atlas is shown as the 5th. That's a little bit of a discrepancy, but more importantly, she has weird sheep ears. She also has sort of like the two-tone hair that Speed had back in Wano. But the sheep ears are interesting because way back in Punk Hazard, right? And you see him in the cover story that we're on, right? The cover story arc thing. Caesar Clown has goat horns, right? Here's the weird part about the goat horns. We know that's not like a Law thing. Law didn't give him those goat horns like he gave Monette her wings or like made Brown Beard and the rest of them into centaurs and satyrs and whatnot. Because he had these back when he worked with Vegapunk. So that leads me to believe that perhaps Vegapunk and Caesar Clown are maybe half mink, which we've seen a lot of like half animal people in the narrative, even as far back as the start of the story, if you know where to look. But I'll do a video on that later, by the way. But yeah, it's a very interesting thing. So we'll have to see if that amounts to anything later, but I think that's very important. What's interesting about Atlas is that she does punch the hologram monster with her light pressure gloves, which makes me think, okay, the joke's out. Kizaru has to be the centerfold of this arc, or at least appear somewhere, because what it seems now with all these holograms and these gloves and so on and so forth, he has to be involved because light technology seems to be such a focal point of most of Vegapunk's work at this point. What's really interesting though, that happens before Atlas punches the hologram monster, she punches Luffy into a machine that makes food. And the first food item that it makes are burgers, fries, and a cola, which are all monogrammed with a star. Here's the funny part, and this is why I think, especially now, when these little sort of tidbits of trivia comes out, like what time the Straw Hats sleep, what are the Straw Hats' favorite food, what will the Straw Hats look like as the opposite genders, what will the Straw Hats look as children, etc., 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 or other characters, will they look as the opposite gender, will they look at as children? Here's why I think that should be paid attention to now, because whose favorite food is this that we're seeing? It's Frankie's favorite food. So the first food item that we see is related to a trivia about Frankie's favorite food. I don't know, guys. I just don't know. It's very telling that this sort of nebulous information matters. It does matter. Even like the whole, like I just said, the warlords as children. That matters now. That's mattering more and more as we're seeing more and more Seraphim. But moving on, we get to see that Lucy, Stussy, and Kaku are on their way to assassinate Vegapunk, all the Vegapunks on the behalf of the world government. And then it's explained what Vegapunk's whole deal is. The whole deal about Vegapunk is that there are 6 satellites that are sort of connected to a main body, all right? Because Vegapunk just wanted to do more by making more of himself, okay? So, here's the interesting part about their whole conversation. They're accompanied by a pacifista seraphim that is a model of Kuma. This particular model does not have flame on his back, and his eyes are obscure, so we don't even know if he has starry eyes, which is interesting because this indeed is a child version of Kuma. You can tell it's because he has like a smooth little baby jaw, like what we see Kuma as a kid. What's interesting about him, though, is that when Kuma's a child, he just has regular eyes. He doesn't have like the weird glasses, rectangular eyes that he has as an adult. So I'm wondering, why did they give him those modifications? Why doesn't he have the star eyes like the rest of them? He does have a star on his tracksuit, which is interesting because now it's making me think all, like I said in the previous video, all important creations by Vegapunk are given this star, right? So I'm wondering now what actually makes this version special if all he has of Lunarian DNA is the wings. Because, I mean, what separates him from like a normal pacifista model? Because I'm assuming like the rest of them, he just shoots lasers out of his hands. He doesn't have like a variant of the paw fruit or some sort of devil fruit. So what actually separates him from the rest of the pack? We'll have to see. What's interesting, and I hope the guy that I was talking to doesn't get mad at me for mentioning this, because I think it's very interesting. He relayed to me that Stussy could be a satellite of Vegapunk. Now, going through the satellite, Punk 6, Greed, which is York, Punk 5, Violence, which is Atlas, and those are the two are kind of swapped. Punk 4, Wisdom, which is Pythagoras. Punk 3, which is the Thinker, who is called Edison. Punk 2, which we met, who is the Evil, whom is called Lilith. And Punk 1, who is the Good, who is named Shaka. Shaka could also be a weird reference to Toriyama, because Toriyama's like avatar, you know how like Oda has an avatar where it's like a guy with a fish head? Toriyama has like a little guy with a gas mask, but we'll have to see Shaka's full face, but that could be a reference or a callback. But we'll have to see. It could just be a Daft Punk reference. I only bring mention to that because we already have a Daft Punk reference in Killer, but we'll see. So the guy I was talking to about Stussy mentioned that she could be some sort of a lust satellite, a satellite that represents lust, because she was sort of in charge of the Pleasure Corner. That's how she was introduced. So we'll have to see how that pans out. What's interesting about Stussy, which I didn't know, her name shares the same name as a clothing brand that was established in 1980 by one Sean Stussy, who was a surfboard manufacturer in California before he started his clothing brand. The interesting part about it is, since he is from California, California does have a star in its flag and a bear, which is kind of a crackpot theory. I know, I'm very self-aware of that, but it's just kind of interesting that we're going over Kuma so in depth in this arc, and star iconography is such a big thing. On the topic of star iconography, or just star stuff in general, Stella is mentioned to be the main body of Vegapunk. Stella is just a word derived from the Latin word for star. So that's very interesting that Lilith says that in reference to Vegapunk, that Vegapunk has told his other selves to refer to him as a star. I'm telling you, the Frankie and Vegapunk parallels are kind of becoming a little ridiculous at this point, but we'll see. It may not mean anything. It may mean something. We'll see. We'll find out. But I've covered everything I wanted to talk about today. Thank you for watching. But, one last thing. I have started a Discord. Link in the description. Join if you feel so inclined. I would appreciate if you did. It's called the Digital Burrow. So if you want to join that, link in the description below. All right, that's it. Thank you for watching. If you like stuff like this, please feel free to check out my YouTube channel, Polipede Works. And if you like what you see, I would appreciate your subscription. Thank you so much. See you next time.